The night she asked me to drive her home, I thought I was doing one simple favor for a friend. I had no idea that by sunrise, the question I jokingly asked, "So where am I sleeping?" would leave both of us standing in the middle of a truth neither of us had been brave enough to say out loud. It had been raining for nearly 2 hours when I saw Emma standing outside the little cafe where we both worked. She was soaked, hugging her coat around herself, staring at her phone with the kind of helplessness that made you forget how tired you were. Her car had broken down, her family lived almost an hour away, and the last bus had already left. When she saw my headlights, relief crossed her face so quickly that I almost smiled. I pulled over and rolled down the window. She leaned toward the car and asked if I could drive her home. I said yes before she even finished explaining. That was how we had always been with each other, never asking for much, never admitting how much we cared, but always appearing when the other person needed someone. Before we continue, if stories about kindness, unexpected love, and second chances touch your heart, please take a moment to like this video, share it with someone who needs hope, leave a comment, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Sometimes one small act of kindness can become the beginning of an entirely different life. Emma climbed into the passenger seat, still shivering. I turned the heater toward her and handed her the spare hoodie I kept in the back. She laughed softly when she realized it was far too big for her. The drive began quietly, with the windshield wipers moving back and forth and the rain painting silver lines across the glass. We had known each other for almost 3 years. We had shared lunch breaks, terrible coffee, birthday cakes, stressful shifts, and countless conversations after work. I knew she hated thunderstorms but loved rainy mornings. I knew she called her mother every Sunday. I knew she always pretended she wasn't tired even when she could barely keep her eyes open. What I didn't know was that Emma had been struggling for months. Her father had recently lost his job, her younger brother had dropped out of college because of money, and Emma had quietly been sending most of her paycheck home. She never complained. She simply worked harder, smiled less, and carried the weight as if it belonged only to her. That night, as we drove through the rain, she finally admitted that she was exhausted. She said she felt like everyone depended on her, but nobody ever asked whether she was okay. I didn't know what to say, so I told her the truth. She didn't have to be strong every second of every day. She turned toward the window, but I noticed her wiping her eyes. When we finally reached her neighborhood, the rain had become even heavier. Emma looked at her house and suddenly became quiet. I assumed she was nervous because of the problems waiting inside. But then she told me her mother had called and asked her not to come home that night because the roof was leaking badly and part of the ceiling had collapsed in the hallway. I looked at her in disbelief. She had nowhere to go. She shrugged and said she could probably find a cheap hotel nearby. I knew she couldn't afford one. Without thinking, I told her she could stay at my apartment. She immediately refused, saying she didn't want to be a burden. I reminded her that she had spent years helping everyone else without hesitation. For once, she needed to let someone help her. After several minutes, she finally agreed. We drove back through the rain. The apartment was small, messy, and definitely not designed for unexpected guests. I apologized for the pile of laundry on the chair and the dishes in the sink. Emma laughed for the first time that evening and said it was comforting to know I was not secretly perfect. I made her tea while she stood near the window watching the rain. There was something different about the room that night. Maybe it was the weather. Maybe it was the exhaustion. Or maybe we had both reached a point where pretending nothing existed between us had become harder than admitting it. I gave her the bedroom and told her I would sleep on the couch. She stared at me for a moment and then asked where I was planning to sleep. I pointed toward the couch. She smiled and said the couch looked terribly uncomfortable. I laughed and told her I had survived worse. Then, trying to lighten the mood, I looked at her and asked, "So where am I sleeping?" Her cheeks suddenly turned bright red. For a second, neither of us moved. I realized how the question sounded, and I quickly laughed, telling her I meant which blanket she wanted me to use. But she was still blushing, and something in her expression made my heart beat faster. She looked away and whispered that she had never thought about me that way. I didn't know whether that was good or bad. Then she admitted that she had thought about me that way many times. The room became completely silent. I had spent years convincing myself that Emma saw me only as a friend. I had buried every feeling because I was afraid that confessing would destroy the friendship we had. She had apparently been doing the same thing. She told me she was scared. She had watched relationships fall apart around her, and she didn't believe she could risk losing another person she loved. I told her I was scared too. I had stayed silent because keeping her in my life, even as a friend, felt safer than risking everything. That night, nothing dramatic happened. There was no perfect kiss, no sudden promise, no movie-like ending. We simply sat on opposite sides of the room and talked until the rain stopped. For the first time, we talked honestly. The next morning, Emma's family called. The damage to their house was worse than they had realized. They needed somewhere to stay while repairs were made. I helped them find a temporary place through a community organization and quietly contributed what I could. Emma discovered it later. She was upset that I had helped financially without telling her, but I told her I wasn't trying to rescue her. I simply wanted her to know that she didn't have to carry everything alone anymore. Weeks passed. Her family slowly recovered. Her brother returned to college. Her father found work. Emma started smiling again, not the polite smile she used to hide exhaustion, but the real one I had almost forgotten. And something between us changed. We started having coffee together before work. We took long walks after closing. Sometimes we said nothing at all and still felt completely understood. One evening, months after that rainy night, Emma and I stood outside the same cafe where everything had started. She looked at me with a playful smile and asked if I remembered driving her home. I told her I remembered everything. She laughed and said she still couldn't believe I had asked where I was sleeping. I smiled and told her that question had probably been the bravest stupid thing I had ever said. Then she reached for my hand. She didn't need to explain anything. I finally understood that love doesn't always arrive with grand gestures or perfect timing. Sometimes it begins with a broken-down car, a rainy road, a borrowed hoodie, and two tired people finally admitting that they don't want to face life alone. Emma once thought asking for help made her weak. I once thought hiding my feelings protected me from heartbreak. We were both wrong. Sometimes the greatest second chance isn't being given another opportunity at life. It's being given another opportunity to trust someone. If this story touched your heart, please like the video, share it with someone who believes they have to face everything alone, and subscribe to Ripple of Kindness. Your support helps these stories reach people who may need a little hope today. And before you go, comment, "I believe in second chances," if you believe that one small act of kindness can change the direction of someone's life. Because sometimes, the person asking you for a simple ride home isn't really asking for a destination. Sometimes, they're quietly asking if they finally have someone beside them for the journey.